Welcome to Future Print Virtual Summit, and the next session is creativity out of crisis. So we've been positioned and placed in an virtually impossible situation where uncertainty at an all-time high. To what extent are rules being broken? Are new opportunities being defined? And actually, is there an opportunity in all of this to use this time to be creative and to use the fact that actually the rules have changed and that demand has shifted with it? So I pulled together a session today with Dave Varty, Rico Europe, Simon Roberts at Integration Technology, and Jonathan Wilson at Meteor Inkjet, all of which are and have been involved in technology in various different ways. Jonathan and Dave have been involved with the inkjet world for a number of years now in various different guises, from software through to hardware, from industrial inkjet, from traditional print. And Simon Roberts has, you've been in engineering a long time, Simon, but also in the automotive sector and more latterly with integration technologies. We've got a really nice rounded viewpoint of innovation in various forms. So the session today, if I'm going to share my screen, there we go. The session today, as I said, it's called Creativity Out of Crisis. The gentleman here we've introduced. So we're going to have a look at the impacts of COVID-19, the challenges we face, and also the changes that have taken place and continue to take place. We've got some results from our survey, the future, or COVID-19, the future of inkjet survey results, and I think it's a good discussion point for each of us to have a look at. And then also that sort of issue of creativity, innovation, and opportunity. Often, you know, necessity is that mother of invention. So it's that kind of positive theme that we want to take through this session. I just thought I'd share the speaker contacts with you as well, should you want to connect with any one of our experts today at another point. So first off, I'm just going to take us straight into the survey. We ran this or launched it on April the 27th. We've back in December, we ran a future survey with Rico, and obviously since then most of the results there have been slightly derailed by what's happened. So we launched another one a couple of weeks ago. So we have 103 responses, global response from 19 different countries, from Europe, the US, and Asia. And obviously one of the first questions we asked is, could you estimate the impact of COVID-19 on demand for inkjet? And I think, you know, clearly it's significant, 20% and above in terms of the impact of COVID-19 on demand. You can probably apply those kind of figures to many industries, but does that sort of chime with what you're hearing, gentlemen? That sort of reduction of demand? So Dave.
Well, yeah. First of all, obviously, there's going to be a reduction in demand because the number of production houses are reduced. Yeah, a lot of companies have closed down.
Yeah.
For the duration. However, I'm seeing trends in completely different areas.
Yeah.
Industrial companies their R&D kind of opportunities are accelerating. All those projects that they didn't have time to do are now increasing. And a couple of points on that. It's really difficult to measure. So you have a company like Prime Group, or the people with flatbed cutters. They're inkjet companies, but they're actually producing masks, and they're producing output that we wouldn't consider to be inkjet. So you've got manufacturing, which is looking at all of these projects, which is secondary packaging, combined static and variable data. You're looking at people who are using their facilities, but for things that weren't originally purposed. And the third side of it is, I've never seen so much floor graphics in my life as I have at the moment. when the virus first started, there were bits of tape that were put down, the hazard warning tapes that were put down by members of staff. Now there's printed discs, they've got a little message on them. And what I'm seeing as well is that people or companies are actually considering sponsoring those floor graphics. So you walk past the beans counter, and I'm sure it's a spoof, but Heinz baked beans, keep your distance. But there is a trend that I see where actually floor graphics is going to turn in, because people are looking down. They're not looking at which aisle they want to be in for consumer or chocolates or biscuits. They're looking at the floor to see which direction they should be walking. And there's a whole new advertising realm that's opening up. Yeah. And as I say, I've never seen so many floor graphics. Every supermarket, even the small ones.
Yeah, and that's a positive thing, isn't it? So there is some creativity, both from the brands and cleverness going on in terms of being helpful on the one hand, but also slightly tongue-in-cheek on the other, which is positive, isn't it? Anyone else want to add anything before we move on to the next?
Yeah, just to really echo what Dave said, we've seen companies coming to us that have not doing digital currently, but have now got the time to look at the digital projects that they've been putting off and starting to invest their time and energy in bringing them forward. So where it would have been a delay if it was business as usual, because it's business unusual, they're able to focus on these new technologies and bring them to the forefront of their own business, which can only bear well for Inkjet going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're saying there is it's added value in terms of the suddenly we're not traveling anywhere. We don't the commitments have changed and so on, and demands are still high, but we've got a bit more time to think in a different way.
A lot of the customers that we're speaking to that have wanted to do digital for the last few years have been so busy doing the usual run rate stuff that they always put the projects to the back burner. Now they're not seeing the demand as they would like to see, so they're able to focus on the innovation piece, which is always secondary. Now that's at the front, which I think will drive further adoption for Inkjet.
Yeah, and I've always said that when people have asked me, who's your major competitor? I said, well, actually, it's not a manufacturer; it's do nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And now people are doing something.
Yeah, that's positive. Yeah, and Simon, you were saying you're sensing a little bit of a change this week in particular.
Yeah, well, actually, one of the things we're pushing now is that we can offer almost a service. UV as a disinfection, sanitization technology. There's a whole raft of applications of people that are now jumping on this UV bandwagon. Saw a press release yesterday where all new Jaguar cars are going to have all their air conditioning systems sanitized or disinfectant with UV in the line of the HVAC. So one of the things we're doing now is we're offering a service of consulting to potential new entries into this market to say, UV, all UV is not the same, and there are completely different powers and intensities of UV that you can use for different applications. So actually, we're looking to advise people more than actually supply a product at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's helping people educating with the technology.
Well, it is. People think UV, and somebody, you see the comments of, well, why don't you just put a UV lamp over the entrance of Tesco's and disinfect customers on the way in? And our suggestion was that you might want to try them on the way out rather than on the way in. But it's just obviously there's so much going on and so many comments about use of ultraviolet light for disinfectant, and obviously there's a whole spectrum, to coin a phrase, of light that does different things. So educate's the wrong word, but certainly to advise people on the right UV for the application.
That's very interesting.
I think Simon makes a really good point there, because there's a lot of negativity about the mainstream press, and the only thing they report are problems. And Simon mentioned press releases, innovation within companies. I'm picking up on stuff on social media, even Facebook. You've got stuff going on LinkedIn. There's actually one that's circulating at the moment, which is a bit ironic, which is Creativity Out of Chaos, as it's titled. And it's the restaurant in Amsterdam that's put up little greenhouses outside so that you can sit in it. None of that's being reported in mainstream news. So there's this kind of underground of creativity that's going on that is never getting talked about unless you're within the industry that or an industry that it relates to.
Because good news doesn't sell. And you know that our numbers we talked about are coming down. And I read somewhere last night, it's like 1 in 400 people. So what they've done is extrapolated the numbers, put out that kind of headline, which is really negative and sounds really scary. In actual fact, the numbers are far better than they were. Anyway, talking of numbers, when do you expect to see restriction relax and normal trading resume? On the face of it, this looks quite positive, doesn't it? October 2020, but Dave in particular had an issue with the way this slide's laid out a little. To explain, if you wouldn't mind.
My comment was just that it should be chronological, so that June 2020 should be the build up to October, and then from October it goes down into 2021, and we see, as Simon said, a bell curve shape. So I agree with the October figure. The June kind of distorts a little bit.
Literally only
there's not
June now.
Not that much. Well, we are really. There's not that much optimism that things will change in June.
No.
Certainly, you had the seminar yesterday about events. Can't see those. Next year, everybody's squashing them all together in the first quarter out of desperation. I don't see any business travel this year.
No.
Overseas business travel.
Yeah.
So the June one just is the ramp up. Those optimists are there, but I agree with October that things will start to become more deliberate.
Yeah, a bit more firm. And like you say, it's how you find normal trading. And the reality is, if you're not leaving you're not traveling to see people, you're not meeting, you're not going to events, then that isn't normal trading. But perhaps confidence will start to become clearer, more concrete, and people will start looking ahead to a time where actually maybe there will be more normal conditions. But I think from yesterday, from what you're saying, it is probably looking like January 21 to April 21 before there's any sort of sense of normality. Maybe in time for Drupa, but we'll see. I mean, some of the big exhibitor brands are just saying there's no business travel for the rest of the year, and I don't know if that necessarily means New Year suddenly things come back on track and everything's normal. I doubt it. So it's not clear.
I think it's going to depend on your fiscal year as well.
Yeah.
Every company is looking at their costs against revenues, and we lost 2 weeks of the final quarter. Our fiscal year is up to March. We lost the 2 weeks. You've already seen what the Chancellor is saying about the recession. That's put us in minus growth, and of course this quarter is going to be minus growth as well. So there's probably going to be personal decisions, and there's probably going to be corporate decisions.
Yeah.
And something like Drupa is a massive expense for everybody.
Yeah, and there could be a redefinition of how people communicate and how we can come on to that. Sectors affected the most by COVID-19. I'm hearing, and this comes through in what I'm hearing, that wide format and commercial print are really badly affected. Are you hearing similar things, Jonathan?
Yes, certainly the wide format and commercial printing segments. But as you move down the graph, it's the inverse. The packaging, the labels, the medical is all seeing really positive activity. But the more traditional markets where people go out and buy their newspapers, go to the shops and get the messaging, as Dave was saying earlier, that's changed. People are going to the shops, but they're no longer looking up; they're looking down. So, an inverse of terms.
I think
So what was
Sorry,
that
Mark.
point you're making, Dave? Yeah, the baked bean analogy. Is it?
Well, the other thing as well is if you look at if you take this as an abstract, you look at B2B and B2C. So where the customers, the end users. So for wide format, it's point of sale, it's events, it's retail, it's even construction. They're going to get hit. Commercial printing is advertising. When you get down to the bottom, it's B2B. So people are still using labels, they're still using medical, they're still looking at packaging. So it's an interesting split in terms of where the dependency is for the end users market. I don't see the that tail off in automotive as much. We have more projects in automotive than we had, but people are clearly not buying flooring or wall coverings or ceramics.
So Simon, you've had experience in automotive. Is that a sector that?
It's whether or not you look at this as as the automotive industry as a standalone sector, or whether you take it obviously as the printing applications and inkjet applications within automotive.
Yeah,
I think you could argue, as Dave sort of says, that those R&D projects that people have had on the back burner for a long time because the day job gets in the way, are coming to the fore in those automotive programs. But certainly, obviously, nobody's buying any cars. That's for certain at the moment. Obviously, traditionally, our business has been 50, 60, 70% wide format. That's one of the reasons why the shareholders of integration decided to bring me in, because it was a fresh pair of eyes outside of that, that wide format industry to bring in other aspects. We have obviously seen a significant drop in new equipment. The upside of that is that people are putting a lot of spares on their shelves. They obviously now realise that the machines that have been slated for replacement within the next 12 to 24 months are probably now not going to happen. So they've got to put the duct tape, on keep the existing machines going. So they are the service and spares side of that business has probably picked up.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Simon. The reports I've seen is 97% reduction in new car registrations. Yet the tier one manufacturers who are supplying the automotive are really doing a load of innovation, and that involves a lot of inkjet.
Right. Yeah. So it's at a different point in the innovation curve. So this activity still ongoing, but actually, like you're saying, sort of buying and selling of the end product, that has changed. That has stopped. Moving quickly on, the increases in demands. I guess you're almost tipping it on its head there. So medical and pharmaceutical, understandably, really high, and I think each of you has a different example that you can bring to the fore here. So we'll start with Dave, and what's happened there. Some of the work that you've done there with Rico. So there's obviously 3D printing and medical.
Yeah, well, the medical and pharmaceutical was actually always on the up curve. They were the ones who could see innovation in blister packs, packaging, language variations, things like that. As you say, this is a chart flipped on its head from the previous one. But 3D printing, I think, is understated, and we've used the bureau in Telford and have been producing products, and it's well documented. Steve Bull, who was Wolves and England forward, came along and took off and distributed masks to the NHS. So I think 3D printing, it won't carry on at the same level, because at the moment it's being used for short run print on demand, but people will realize the value of it in advanced engineering for things like pre-tooling, where you want mass products. But medical and pharmaceutical, let's call it healthcare, because dental is also in there. was always on the up curve, and I think the ones lower down reflect the kind of COVID impact.
Yeah, COVID impact. Thank you. Yeah, so it's like you say that I think 3D printing has always been mooted as a technology solution that can be used in crisis situations and emergency situations, and actually what we've seen the work with the PPE equipment and so on is that in action and delivering value and so on. So that's a positive. So Jonathan, with your work with Meteor, you've got anything that you've seen some increase in demand, or any specific examples?
Well, funny enough, we do a fair bit in ceramics, and last year ceramics was dire. This year ceramics has come in strong again and continues to pull strong, specifically out of China, but we do see activity now beginning to wind up in Europe, which is good. So that market segment is coming back. I know the ceramic machine manufacturers are all looking at different avenues to take their machine building technologies into corrugated label, glass printing. So what we're seeing from them is positive actions. Just to build on the 3D printing piece, we've seen a lot of customers that are coming in that are looking at the binder jetting piece, the metal casting piece, using industrial 3D printing technologies within the manufacturing sector, and that's really coming on strong for the last 6 months. And even in the first quarter of this year, we've seen a lot of interest for new startups coming in. So it's really positive for that segment.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And Simon, so medical, pharmaceutical, and you've kind of alluded to a little already, haven't you, in terms of the sanitization and issue that we have now as a primary concern?
Yeah, we obviously, as I was saying, there's been a lot of press around the use of ultraviolet light for the sanitization of all sorts of different applications.
Do you want me to flip to your slides there, or?
Yeah, you can. Do you want to drive? You can drive from your end if you want.
Okay.
While you're doing that, I mean, we've had a product, a medium pressure lamp that we've sold as part of a curing system in the printing industry for many years. I think we've delivered over 10,000 of those units. We have recently converted that product into a portable handheld sanitizer, UVC sanitizer, and the testing that we've done when compared to published data for the SARS-CoV-1 virus from the early 2000s is that from a distance of about 200 millimeters, we can inactivate the virus in about 8 to 10 seconds. So, you know, I've become an armchair virologist in the last 6 weeks. And so all of the people that we talk to are saying that all the testing in the UK, even at places like Porton Down, when they can't actually get hold of the coronavirus, the CoV-2 virus, they're using the SARS-CoV-1 virus as the closest relative in terms of disinfection and sanitization. So this is you can see here, this is the handheld unit, which we're targeting at applications where the use of solvent, disinfectant, traditional disinfectant is not great. The recent one we've had is that a lot of the air traffic control equipment in control towers, a lot of it in the UK at some of our smaller airports is very old. And therefore it's very sensitive to any types of disinfectant, alcohol wipe. So they're quite interested in what is effectively a non-contact disinfection process, and this would be ideal. Also for small spaces like the backs of ambulances, it would also work. Right now, we see a real application of actually statically mounting these units on escalators and sanitizing the moving handrails on escalators and moving walkways, we can simply mount the units underneath the running gear of those units, or where what is an absolute hotbed of bacteria and viruses are the plastic trays that are used at the airport security screening lanes, where those plastic bins for your laptops and the like go through hundreds and thousands of pairs of hands per week. We're looking to retrofit our sanitization lamps into a sterilization tunnel on the return line for the plastic trays. So each tray is sanitized between one passenger putting it down and another one picking it up. And as you can see on this slide, you know, we're focusing. We only have a certain amount of resources within the team, so we're focusing on where we think the high level of application is. But we're taking inquiries from facilities management companies, shopping trolleys, shopping baskets at supermarkets, all of these things potentially where anything that goes through you know, a high number of hands in a day, a week, a month, we're looking at, because I think we're all in agreement the general attitude to the cleanliness of the things that we pick up in a public arena is probably going to change forever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is something you pulled together very quickly, isn't it? You sort of
yeah, so interestingly, you know, that it's a long story that actually I won't bore you with now, but obviously I just mentioned that the shareholders at Integration Technology wanted to bring in somebody with a fresh focus. I came in to look at different products, and the one on the far left there is a handheld LED curing unit, which is used for scratch and dent repair in auto refinishing. And it was our first handheld product outside of printing that was potentially a product that we sell direct to the end users, directly into car body shops, auto repair shops in the US. And that was really just starting to take off. It's a very scalable product. We can sell, you know, multiple thousands of that. Then, of course, came along the coronavirus. And so what we've done is we've effectively merged a static lamp product we had with the new portable unit, merged the two together, and actually now have a portable UV lamp, UVC sanitizer. So, you know, some of the things that we've done over the last 12 months have now allowed us to react quickly into these new applications. And it's, you know, it's difficult not to keep saying that these are really actually exciting times in business, because, you know, it's a really difficult time, but at the same time, the pace of evolution and the things that we're having to react to almost on an hourly basis is very interesting.
Yeah. Well, good for you for doing so. I can see you can see a number of different applications, as you mentioned, facilities managers, and I'm thinking venues, I'm thinking exhibitions, events, and all of the temporary kind of
and that's just where it's horses for courses, Marcus. You know, we for example, on a tray return system in an airport, you need to sanitize the tray in 8 to 10 seconds. Otherwise, you slow down the screening process in an airport. That can't be done. If you put our unit on the ceiling of a public toilet, it will effectively fry anybody that walks in. If you take a low pressure germicidal UV lamp and you try and sanitize a tray in an airport with it'll take you half an hour, which obviously just is not acceptable to the flow rate of the trays that you need in airport. Bolt that to the ceiling of a public toilet, a communal toilet in the NEC or a venue or wherever, and it does a great job in sanitizing that area generally in periods of downtime overnight. I mean, this is worth saying about us providing a service now of trying to advise new players into this arena in terms of what is the right UV for their application.
Brilliant. So, and going back to the survey, how have you responded to the crisis? Clearly, you have used the time to collaborate and innovate, and that comes out high. And I think this is an optimistic sample of people. and I use the word optimistic or positive, but Jonathan, you said actually maybe it isn't just optimism.
No, I think it's realism. I think people are taking the opportunities to do the things they hadn't done. We, for example, have looked at business models, renewed them, look at new ways of getting people to adopt technologies by making the financial piece even easier. It's just reflecting the new state that we live in.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of forced necessity, isn't it? It's kind of
Yeah,
like, well, actually, I haven't got a choice now. I've got to try and create something out of this. Yeah,
innovate or die. Yeah.
Yeah, just following from what Jonathan's just said. I remember a conversation with a well-known MD in the inkjet industry at Leaders in Technology. So it'd be nice to know that the event actually brought something to it. And he said, we stifle our industry through NDAs. And I read a report just in the last couple of days that companies are not enforcing IP in order to accelerate creativity.
That's an interesting point. Yeah,
that first point just illustrates we've used the time to collaborate and innovate, and people are coming together and saying, actually, the old rules don't make sense. Let's get on with it.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and that is quite refreshing in a way, isn't it? To be fair.
It is.
Yeah,
it is, and that could be a new model. We hope so.
Yeah, we do.
So using the time to innovate. What do you expect to become more permanent once lockdown eases in terms of, I guess not just generally, not specifically inkjet, but just more generally, as came out on top was we'll attend more virtual meetings and events. I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? Remote working becomes normalized, reduction in business travel, limitation on attending events. That's possibly more of an immediate impact that people are doing right now, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't know whether, maybe that will happen, that will become, because the technology's here, we can collaborate using it, can't we? It's I hear some people saying actually we can communicate more effectively now. We're making better use of our time. And
I think in many ways this is a response to the current situation. But on a business perspective, there's something about sitting down with your prospect, your customer, and looking at what they're doing, walking around their factory, understanding their challenges that you just can't do virtually. You can do 50% of it, but the rest, the nuances of that interaction are lost. And if you're going to build long-lasting relationships, I personally believe getting out and in front of people, seeing what they're doing and meeting their customers is still going to be key going forward once the tail end of this settles down. It's not saying that things won't change. I think certainly remote working, even myself, will consider doing much more of that. And I think there will be more virtual events, but I still think there's a time and a place where we're going to want to sit in front of our customers, have a drink, eat, be social, the social beings that we are.
Well, I think also not just the social side. I agree with everything that you just said, Jonathan. But in my opinion, there's no substitute for observation. Indeed. You walk into a customer's manufacturing site and you look at something, they've asked you one question.
Yep.
The answer is completely different.
Yep.
And so many times, I think that what you've got here as the trend answers will probably stay the same hierarchically, but it will probably drop down to 50%. So we will attend more virtual meetings and events, and no matter what we say, I've found that not having traveled since February, the amount of time, extra time that I've got to get on with other work is amazing.
Yeah.
Remote working, well, I've always worked from home anyway, but remote working will become normalized and hot desking will drop off, and there's got to be some big changes. Real estate is really going to suffer, I think, because people will be just looking to get out of leases and say
Yeah.
we don't need all this office space.
Yeah.
Business travel will drop off for sure. Uncertainty in the airline industry with everything on the ground at the moment. So I think the hierarchy will stay the same, but it will kind of level itself off in percentages as we go through.
I think I think virtual events have a place. What we're finding, so obviously this is a virtual event that we're doing, is that there's some amazing platforms out there, but yet to find one. I mean, you mentioned virtual reality, Dave, and I know there's a lot of investment, really high end, for creating event experiences usually. But you know, that moment that you meet somebody at an event, you have a shared experience, you bump into each other on the plane, you go through that kind of literally a journey. I mean, you just can't replicate that. And the question that came out yesterday's session, which was about the future of events, and the poll that we did was, and it was quite interesting because there's an analogy, you know, very, very similar to how digital works in traditional industries in our market in print, is that actually, if they'll do different things. Virtual events, they'll complement live events, but they won't replace.
Yes.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? Digital,
much more of an augmented virtual event to supplement what's going on in the real world.
Yeah,
exactly.
But you if you go back to the demise of IPEX, and I remember when I first started out in the industry a couple of years ago, IPEX was a massive event. Then there was consolidation, and then there was the internet. And as Jonathan said, people weren't. They were doing all of their desk research first, and just going along to have a look and make sure they got it right. Just as the motor show, I think Simon mentioned, it only takes one or two people to pull out, and these big events will fold. But the interesting thing is that we're talking about the print industry. Ourselves, we showed the VR goggles at Drupa 2016. I know Canon and other Japanese electronics companies have all got these technologies going on. That's going to change estate agency. It's going to change events, whatever you say. People are going to virtually view these activities. So I think there is a big change that will come out of it. And people will become used to new technology. I'm sure with everybody furloughed or home working or whatever, they've got used to gaming with VR goggles on and things, and they'll just expect that to be a normal thing for business when they come back.
Yeah, and I think as well as that, there's a whole in the virtual world, there's a whole community of technology innovators that are creating these platforms. They're not event people. These people are, as you said earlier, rewriting the rules. They're not following the same rules that event people would. So we would look at the venue, the time, the date. We'll market like that. Is it the right place? Is it close to there? You just run it online. You don't need to ask all of these permissions, and you don't have the cost necessarily attached to a big venue that costs a lot of money to run an event. Anyway, so it's interesting discussion. I don't want to get too into events. I want to focus back now into general manufacturing. And do you think of the challenges for general manufacturing and retail supply chain? I think there's a lot of people have said that that's been revealed to be a little inflexible and not really delivering. That supply chains had difficulties. Obviously, we can't see the answers on this, but here we are. We expect to see an increase in digital manufacturing, and I think by that meaning automation and being able to sort of have a more integrated digital manufacturing capacity to help solve future supply problems comes out high, closely followed by reshoring. This is something you flagged up to me a while back, actually, Dave, which is why we're having this chat, was that you also, whilst you're not necessarily seeing reshoring, you think it's becoming a more of a growing concern once more.
Well, I think the first question is digital manufacturing. Absolutely. I get more inquiries from manufacturing companies now than I do from OEMs. These are people trying to solve their issues, not necessarily supply problems, but we talked about, or Dave Gray talked about the problem with the flour supply in a previous one. It was nothing to do with the flour, it was the bags. And I think we'll see a lot more late stage print curing. You asked the question about Industry 4.0. I think automation will increase. Machines, of course, get viruses, but they don't need to self-isolate whilst they're being cured. And what's the difference between somebody sitting in an office remote from the manufacturing site, looking at data as it comes in to do predictive maintenance? Why can they not work at home? I think reshoring, absolutely. There's a recognition now supply chain needs to be shorter.
Definitely.
And cheaper is not necessarily better in the end result.
No.
So I agree with all of these figures. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I think the reshoring piece is what we're beginning to see, where there's a realization that the supply chains are stretched too thin, and in times of crisis, they're just unable to fill even the basics. So having small onshore facilities to meet that short-term spike in demand is certainly something we're seeing from inquiries coming in, people wanting to build some kind of short-term capacity to meet those spike demands.
And that could accelerate some of the kind of key values of digital, right? And inkjet in particular.
It's all digital.
It's all digital.
It's all digital. Yeah, it has to be, because there's no point in having an intermediary step. They want that flexibility of digital. They want to be able to bolt on something to an existing line, which so they get the value from it.
Next one is consumer trends. Do you think will grow as a result? Obviously, remote working, hygiene, health, medical sector investment and growth. Simon will be happy with that. Online retail is obviously already growing, and that's. And I think you've said this sort of, what was it? It's industrial Darwinism, Dave.
Yeah, well,
online retail will grow significantly at the expense of bricks and mortar, I suppose.
Well, I put a caveat on that,
okay.
Which is your point 4. There's a greater focus on buying localized products.
Okay.
You know, there's a lot of people that talk about the demise of the high street.
Yeah.
Actually, I see the high street in my local area really strong, and when the nail bars and the hairdressers open up, there's going to be queues streaming outside. But the butcher, the baker, I want to say the candlestick maker. But all the local services, the farmers market, which is on today, you know, they have serviced a local market, and I just hope that people have a memory that will be something that they can sustain. What I put in the report, this industrial Darwinism, the idea is it's not the strongest or the fastest that will survive, it's the one most adaptable to change.
Absolutely.
And I also said that just as people have underlying health conditions, businesses have underlying health conditions. And this idea of Darwinism accelerates change positively and negatively. And what it's done is change the face of the retail industry, which was fashion-based. The shops that were dependent on, you know, take Arcadia as an example. Yeah, they were in trouble before. The whole COVID-19 is not their problem. It's just accelerated that problem. So I think that there are accelerations both ways. There's going to be a return to the high street, localized, which is the point 4. Point 3, of course, people will be so used to buying online. And the health, hygiene and medical sector actually, I think, was in an upward curve even before.
Yeah.
and that's just going to accelerate.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, anything you want to add onto that?
No,
Really?
I think Dave's points are significant. I think the piece for measuring a company's health is its rate of innovation. And I think we've seen a lot of the traditional bricks and mortar companies are fading away now, and they were fading away anyway because they were unable to innovate against the online retail. And it's the same for print companies. There are lots of technologies out there for them to adopt and to adapt to, instead of just thinking traditionally, well, I need to make a printed shell for a book. The technology is there to enable their businesses to grow and evolve, but they have to make the choices.
Yeah, and it is about and some businesses have just sort of battened down the hatches and hopefully waiting for the storm to pass and then to re-emerge and carry on as normal, and others are adapting and changing, and it's not a guarantee of success, is it? But you're raising the likelihood of you will survive by doing that.
I think if we've seen one thing out of this, that normal is going to be so far away from what we've known in every way. Airlines, holidays, everything's going to be very different, and it's going to stay that way.
Yeah, Simon, is there anything you want to add there?
No, I think they're all really valid points. I was just, the psychology in business that I was reading was about the fight, the flight, and the freeze. And it's interesting to see the people that are true fighters, the true characters that come out of the resilience of this unwillingness to give up of the fighters. There are people that have already given up. They've decided that this is just so overwhelming. There's just no point even. The tsunami has come and washed everything away. And then there are the ones that freeze because it's an overwhelming situation. They don't know which way to go. I mean, I only know how to keep fighting. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But,
well, I think it is a positive.
I can imagine
isn't
for
it?
some people, I can imagine. I just wondered. I took the dog for a walk just before this meeting and noticed that another one of the local pubs within the dog walking radius is up for sale. They obviously just can't keep it sustained, and it would appear that they have obviously realised they've got at least another 2 months before they can serve beer from the tap, but the one round the corner, you can buy them in gallon plastic tubs. At least they're trying to.
I think, Simon, that's the key. My local is predominantly does trade with food. So what they've done is they've advertised locally on the social media, and they're delivering food within a certain radius. They've not, their business has not stopped; it's evolved.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would echo that. I actually had a curry on Friday from my local Indian. In fact, I bought two, one to freeze. Collection only.
Order.
But it was fantastic. And just as Jonathan said, there's a local pub. There's actually two in a local radius. And I spoke to them. Well, I tried to place an order for Sunday lunch, and they were too busy because they had 70. This was on a Friday evening. They had 70 fish and chips to deliver.
Yeah. Exactly.
And at that point, which was about a month ago, they had done 3,000 meals for takeaway.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can order wine and beer as well to go out. So perfect example, Jonathan.
Exactly.
It's always about beer and food.
Yeah. Exactly. And innovation.
Barometers.
And innovation.
Gentlemen, that's brilliant. Unless anybody's got any sort of closing comments to make, I think that's kind of wrapped up a nice discussion around the fact that, from what I'm getting from it anyway, is that actually nobody knows the answers. However, being proactive, responding to what you see in front of you, how you can adapt your product to then meet this new demand that in essence helps a situation, is going to place you in a far better position. It's a good strategy, isn't it? Action and energy, and
it is.
And waiting to see what will happen. Might feel safer, but actually we're almost got to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, I think.
Indeed, exactly.
at least for the foreseeable future.
Yep.
But no, listen, thanks for joining us. A really interesting
Thanks, Mark.
session, and yeah, we'll look forward to some positivity that comes out of the summit. So thanks, gentlemen.